you so much. Our presentation is very short and sweet. And we're really fortunate to come right after Debbie and Ayanda because they set the context really well. Because they already operate in South Africa, it means that especially Debbie covered a lot of the similar kind of landscape that we have as well. So the picture that you're looking at right now is actually the facility that we're sitting in. We're sitting in the containerized structure on your left-hand side there. But essentially, we're presenting ourselves as an organization, as the case study. And this is looking at what it is that we do here in our facilities and the space that we offer as an aspirational reprieve. So a space where people in the community of Diepsloot are able to catch a break, catch their breath, but also in a beautiful space where they can aspire to something bigger and greater than what it is available. So the space on the right is known as the Father Louis Blondel Center, and it was built 10 years ago in 2013. The space on the right is the eHub Diepsloot. It was built in 2016 and launched in 2017. So the one on your left is more of your technology hub, and the one on your right is more of a business hub. But we serve a community in Diepsloot, which is about 12 square kilometers. And the last time there was a count, it was about 800,000 people in that space. So huge population in a small environment, and with most of the housing quite tightly packed next to each other, much as Debbie has explained in terms of what spatial planning, particularly during the apartheid era, resulted in. Even though Diepsloot is a post-apartheid township, it still has the same sort of interface to it. And luckily for us, we're in a space where there is a lot more space for people to be able to think and to breathe and to be. So you can see some of the housing that is closest to our facilities to give you somewhat of an idea of the densely populated space that we operate in. But even still, we are in most, like I would say, slightly more affluent area. And I think what was really interesting about some of the other conversations that we heard about, I think Debbie used the term intangible, and we know how strong the concept of tangible and intangible is, you know, especially when you're looking at the memories that are created in a particular space. So we like to pride ourselves in being a multi-dimensional space, but we can move on to the next slide so I can get a little bit deeper into that. So yeah, as I mentioned, this is the Father Louis Blondel Center. It's the facility right next door to where we are. And we pride ourselves in connecting the unconnected. So we do this in a multitude of ways. And we essentially base that on a shared model. So all of our facilities, all of our resources are available to the community of Diepsloot free of charge. But we want people to share, right? Because that way we're able to expand on the little resources that we are able to have and rather focus on quality rather than quantity, so that we base it more on a time sharing model. And yeah, hope that people are able to respect the resources that we're able to provide to them so that more people have access to it in the community of Diepsloot. So in terms of the free internet access and the tech resources, we essentially want to do this so that people have more opportunities, more information and choice, because we know that poverty really does deprive people of the ability to choose what it is that they want. And usually when you're working in spaces like townships, you usually get hand-me-downs, things that aren't really significant. And so we pride ourselves again on quality over quantity. So as I mentioned, we established in 2013. There are quite a number of kids who are about to leave our center, so you will hear a lot of background noise. And that really does just emulate what it is that we do here. After school, there are way more kids than there are before, because these children are able to come into our facilities, be able to use the computers, able to print, so they're able to do research amongst themselves and in a safe space. So we have 24-hour security available on our precinct. And so that's not something that's typical in Diepsloot. We have really good mechanisms where we get people to sign in and out on a consistent basis. Our participants are quite aware of our code of conduct. It's something that's printed. It's something that people sign. We also have it, you know, put it everywhere in the precinct so that people are able to adhere to some of the requests that we have of them, you know, because you get what we have here, but the more you can respect it, the more we have to be able to share with other people. So we offer dignity. We really are a space where we can generate elements of dignity in a space that doesn't really have these aspirational reprieves. We have toilet facilities that always have toilet paper, that are always clean. And sure, that sounds like, you know, an easy thing, but in a space like Diepsloot, where most of the toilets are actually not even situated inside homes. Something that a lot of people don't know is that houses in this township and in a lot of townships actually don't have sewage inside drainage systems inside their homes. So a toilet can be shared by a multitude of houses. So that's a number of families sharing one toilet or one tap. And this is something that is still prevalent and quite common in areas like the ones that we have here in Diepsloot. And so them or our community being able to use the space and not have to go too far to open a tap of water or particularly flush the toilets is something that really does change how they feel in the space. So we host about 48 SMMEs. These are small enterprises, small to medium enterprises, about 100 children. And these are figures that I'm giving you on a month-to-month basis. So we have about 100 children that come into the space monthly, 250 youth. These are youth who maybe want to just apply for a job, or trying to put together a CV, or trying to apply for university. And because we have the free internet and the free resources, they're able to do that. About 200 community members, anyone who's just trying to photocopy their ID, to somebody who's also doing anything that a youth member is particularly trying to do, they have the opportunity to do that. Something quite interesting as well in terms of the shared model that we have is that community members are also able to book our facilities for any events or training that they also want to be able to use. And then they would have to sign something like a sponsorship agreement form, because even though we're not giving them any money, the resources that are allocated for that do cost something, you know, whether it's actual, you know, transactional or not. We're trying to instill the concept in our participants' minds that nothing is for free. And just so that you have the access, it does not mean that it actually doesn't cost somebody something at the end of the day. We have about 50 ECD practitioners that come and use our facilities. ECDs are early childhood development. So creches, essentially preschools. And in a space like Diepsloot, which is about 12 square kilometers, there's more than 200 ECDs. And so that is a lot of people. And so just because we're in one space, the 50 that come to us are probably the ones that are closest to us, because of course, transportation costs quite a bit. So people who can walk here are the ones that would come here. There's about 20 wastepreneurs. I don't know if you know what a waste collector is, but it's people who actually go about on a trolley and they actually do the separation at source for most of us. So when we put our dustbins out at the end of the week, let's say pick it up, or the municipality comes and collects those on Wednesdays, the waste collectors would come on the Tuesday night, sort whatever trash is there to be able to distinguish the plastic from the tins, you know, and we know that there's different types of plastics. And so they recycle different types of waste, and they're able to take that to the closest buyback center to be able to scale that and be able to get money for that waste. And so we recently did a program with Waste Aid, where they were training 20 waste collectors to consider themselves as waste entrepreneurs, essentially. And then as well, we have 40 women entrepreneurs that specifically work in the crocheting space. So we can go to the next slide because time is not on my side.
So the building that we are in is the eHub Diepsloot. It's been in operation since 2017 and was built with the help of a company called Ericsson. So in this facility, we actually use it for quite a number of things, from a place where our businesses or anyone else in the community, especially community-based organizations, can use it for trainings, for meetings, because there's not a space like this around in Diepsloot where people can actually get people from surrounding suburbs, which are more wealthy, And there's not a lot of options for them for a space where it's a bit more clean and welcoming and more comfortable, so they can come here and use our facilities to have these kind of meetings with people. And also, we also have a content creation lab. So this again is for our small organizations that we assist, just so that they can have a space where they can come in and do what they need to do, like post-production work. Because Diepsloot is so condensed and overpopulated, there's not a lot of places where it's quiet and they can actually do some good quality work, especially when it comes to recording and audio. Sound equipment can actually be heard, like it can pick up voices quite easily. So having a space like this where they can actually just go away from the noisy environment that they are in, just to come to a place where they can actually hear themselves, hear their thoughts. So we also have a recording studio and a toy library that is also in this building that we are in. And yeah, can you go to the next slide? I'm just also time conscious. So our premises is safe for children. And we've noticed that in the 10 years we've been operating here in Diepsloot, we want to focus more on the children to kind of enhance our vision of the improved livelihoods. Because of the trauma and the other things that adults still have to deal with, we want to get to the children and give them a space where they can not feel like they can actually come to a space where it's a bit more safer, because we're trying to make better business people for the future, so that they can actually run businesses that are more sustainable. Because we found with the businesses that we've worked, there's so many other challenges which need a lot of work that we need to do with these individuals actually, so that their businesses are more sustainable. And also we have a huge focus now on greening and technology, and we want to introduce this to the children at a very early stage. Not yet.
Cool. So in terms of some of the other containers that we have in our precinct, there's an eco-exchange container. So these children that use our facilities, they're encouraged to bring wet waste. If anyone doesn't know what wet waste is, it's, your orange peels, your tea bags. They basically collect that from their homes. They're able to bring that here every Friday, and that is scaled. And the value of whatever weight it is they bought, they get eco bucks for that. And so with those eco bucks, they're able to go into the eco exchange container, buy things such as sanitary pads, deodorant, combs, things that we would be able to buy on a day-to-day basis. The children are able to get, but they actually learn that waste is a commodity that has transactional value. And they also are able to teach their families and people at home that there's this concept called separation at source, because they're like, hey, make sure you don't throw that away, because I can get something that I need at the end of the week with that. In line with this greening strategy that we have, which is quite circular, we think very systemically. We've planted about 123 trees in and around Diepsloot. I would say about 30 of those are on our precinct, and the rest of them are around Diepsloot, because we noticed that in townships, you don't find a lot of these spaces where people can actually just sit under a tree and read a book. So yeah, we have children that are actually going through a program which teaches relational equity, and that's something that's changed our mindsets completely, and why it is we're seeing the focus on children more, because if they self-actualize and we're able to intervene at a younger stage, the quality of businesses that we'll be dealing with in the same precinct 10 to 15 years from now will be next level. You can go to the next slide.
So in the last 10 years that we've been operating here in Diepsloot, we have touched the lives of over 10,000 people in multiple ways. So our approach is very high touch. It's a high touch model, and it's no one size fits all. We actually look at the individual and see how we can assist them individually. So, and we use a shared resources, which Nokwanda actually spoke about earlier on, because we do know that resources are scarce. So we try and make use of what resources we can, so we can actually assist a whole lot of people than just assisting one person. And yeah, I think we can also take it.
Yeah, I mean, this is our second last slide. The last one just takes you back to the picture of how beautiful our space is, and how much we are able to do with a very dynamic concept, but we could have spoken for endless hours because of the different elements that we're able to to roll out. But we look at ourselves as a pipeline, and we deal with all focus areas, but we just want people to be able to think and breathe and be, so that they can be better versions of themselves. So we do that in multiple ways. So thank you so much for allowing us your time.
Thank you so much, What If Trust, for that beautiful presentation. And thank you to all of our presenters today. I think that there's so much there and there's so much we could dig into, but we just have a little bit of time left. So I do have one question, and this is for all of you. And I know that Debbie had mentioned earlier that there's a lot of energy within South African cities around centering Indigenous people and practices. And the way that that's come up that she mentioned was through name changes. I'm also curious how else in the work that you all do you center the Indigenous knowledge and practices in your work? What if Josh, you can start?
This is actually quite an interesting question that you asked, because we're at a place in our organization where we have some conflicting ideas in terms of how it is to reintroduce more Indigenous knowledge systems into Western philosophy, right? Because the world is so capitalistic and so Christian, and we are so colonized. And I mean, apartheid was a greater, more enforced point of colonization. We're struggling with that. So I mean, your question is spot on with something that we're actually now having to tackle in some way, shape, or form. So I'm somebody who's a huge believer in Indigenous knowledge systems. Some of our management team are as well. But from a staff perspective, we're actually, it's something that we're having to start with, and we have to start with it from a stakeholder relationship point of view. So we're having to have a lot of conversations from an inclusivity point of view. So it's not just about a religious versus cultural thing. It's actually about saying, okay, how do we actually not judge people and allow more people who aren't maybe Christian or clean or straight into the space, and allow for them to still feel safe and wanted and valued. So I wish I'm answering your question, but I can say on a real, genuine point, and if I'm being honest and not trying to sugarcoat it, it's something that we're trying to deal with.
Thank you so much. Melissa, did you have any other thoughts?
No.
Awesome. I'll turn it over to Ayanda and Debbie, give you an opportunity to answer the question as well, maybe for your particular urban context. How are you centering, or what does it look like to center Indigenous knowledge and practices in your work?
Okay, thank you so much for that. It's such a difficult question, and I'll go back to the skills to facilitate and navigate these conversations and different interests. There's a project that you are working on right now, looking at rivers as public spaces. So it's a part of a big initiative on nature-based solutions. So these issues of having one group, like of having diverse uses and also diverse practices, in public spaces such as wetlands and rivers and so forth and so on, where you see people, and even nature reserves, where you see people wanting to use the space maybe for harvesting medicine, medicinal plants, and others for baptism and others for worshiping, for praying, and other groups not understanding those practices or those, the use of space like that. So we are having that conversation now because we even had a tragedy where people died, in the river whilst they were worshiping or doing other practices. So it's about asking ourselves that we are in Africa, so are we looking at public spaces or focusing on these places and look at them like with a view of the global north? Is that the template, that you are using, where other practices and uses are not deemed as important So it's a big question, and you are continuing to navigate it, and it's good that you are grappling with it now. So we can come back to that, and maybe we can have another webinar to see how far are we progressing. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Debbie, what about you?
Yeah, no, I think you need to have another session just for that question. Just
Happy to.
yesterday, just yesterday we had what we call an Indaba, which is, I suppose, a big conference that we hosted on culture, heritage, and urban space. So obviously, because of our history, especially in a city, so what we see as representation of heritage, etc., is the colonial statues, and so there's a big debate about that. And what we have embarked on, especially in a city, even in the township areas, is that we have to tell both stories. So, there's also a move to actually destroy, some of the existing colonial heritage depictions across this. But if somebody comes into our inner city, you don't feel comfortable in that space if you don't see yourself represented in that space. So how do we do that? But maybe just that's at a different scale. But it's a very, very topical thing at the moment. But it's got to do with, South Africa being the complex a space that it is, with 11 languages and all the cultures and all of those sort of things. And how do you do due diligence to represent all of that, and that there's expression of that diversity all over. And we're far from getting it right, but I think we're starting to have the difficult conversations. So in the Helenvale context, for instance, in the schools, is starting, because there's Khoisan, which is like First Nations, etc., is having them represented in Indigenous games, etc. That those things are being brought back to children to learn how to play Indigenous games, etc., and that they are then taught their own culture, and to be proud of that. We brought a group of tourists here, and I think we took them to a restaurant, and the restaurant is called A Taste of Africa, and they serve burger and chips. So what about our local foods, and representing across the economy, across the social landscape, who we are and what we are proud of, and to make space for each other. So that is it's a big question. It's an ongoing thing, but I think it's small steps, but it starts in families. It starts in local communities. There's not some big organizations that's going to do that. It's not even a project, it's a movement of South Africa in terms of diversity, making space to represent our heritage and our culture in our spaces. That's what gives it meaning. Everybody says that there is blood on the ground in South Africa. There's a DNA in the soil. We have to tell those difficult stories. Otherwise, you have this dissociation with the land. The land issue is so emotive, etc. But it's in that people feel that there hasn't been the restitution. How can we talk about all of these things when some of the rights haven't been wronged? Some of the wrongs haven't been righted. So yeah, I think people are starting to do it in their small ways, but I think it needs a concerted move by all of us to agree that the one story is not more important than the other one, that we have to make space for each other.
Thank you so much, Debbie. And I know that we're a little bit over time, but I have one rapid fire question for everybody. We're here to discuss place management for social transformation. And so in this kind of rapid fire last question to all of our participants, I'm curious, within your specific context, what do you think is necessary of the South African public sector, private sector, and civic sectors within your specific urban context to move closer towards social transformation? We can start with Ayanda.
Thank you very much. I think from my experience working in different communities, whether it's informal settlements or it's in the inner city of Johannesburg, I think people, what they yearn for and what they appreciate is when government shows up, you know. They don't need a lot of things, but just for us to show up. It's very difficult to access government, especially local government, for ordinary people. It's like a maze to access government, to know who's doing what. But if we can just continue to show up, that will be a start of, well, like a first step in the right direction. Because if we show up, the community will show up for us. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ayanda. Debbie, final thoughts? What's necessary for social transformation?
Yeah, look, a difficult one because I've got so many different views, and I think I'm conflicted myself as to what would be the key thing. But in South Africa, I mean, the social transformation is bringing restoring a balance. I mean, I think Ayanda spoke about dignity, which I think is something that we are not having honest conversations about. So for that social transformation to happen will only be realized once a township can say that they are equally serviced as the suburbs are. That the Black child can say that the quality of education and the quality of health care is the same as a white child. And I'm sorry to talk in this racialized terms, but that is very much still where we are at. And we sort of gloss over those things. And if you are below the breadline, you don't have choices. You have to be satisfied with what you are being given handouts. And our government, unfortunately, has still got a long way to go in terms of fixing that, an actual transformation. I mean, a popular township in Gqeberha, New Brighton, still looks like it did 20 years ago. So what are we talking about when we speak about transformation? What have we transformed? Are we speaking about racial restitution, rebalancing that? Are we talking about economic emancipation, etc.? So I think even the term transformation is not understood in the same way by everybody. But I really think once we have to deal with the land issue, and I think the identity of South Africa. So Rainbow Nation is something that we've clung onto, but I mean, it's become almost it's become some sort of an excuse for, oh, we are, all together, a united nation, kumbaya, all of those sort of things. And we far from that, because the real transformation 20 years down the line, we don't see. I'm saying somebody as being of mixed race with a white mom and a black dad. I can honestly say that a lot more. So apartheid was a deliberate, orchestrated system. Transformation needs to be a deliberate, orchestrated system. It's not going to happen by itself.
Thank you so much, Debbie. And I think that's interesting, just kind of your comments. It's not just South Africa. There are so many spatial planning systems around the world that were very deliberate in separation of service delivery and in separation of people, and very successful in doing that. And we still see that today. And so I'm going to turn it over to Nokwanda and Palesa. Last final kind of thoughts. What is necessary for social transformation in Diepsloot?
you know what's nice about being the young one in the room, the younger one, is, you know, when you listen to the elders, they cover everything so amazingly, right? But I mean, I think spot on. No, like for real. I think everything that has just been covered. I think the main things that I think I would add, or that we would add rather, is the importance of the stakeholder engagement. So exactly as Debbie mentioned, the indaba element to it. But personally, I think the emphasis that we put on governments, which have failed us for way too long, is still not necessary, right? Because we keep finding ourselves stuck in this loop. So I would like to think that the stakeholder engagement amongst ourselves, as people who use the community and who use the spaces, the business people, the children, the grannies, us having that stakeholder engagement amongst ourselves to say, how do we actually solve some of these challenges that we're faced with? Because that element of awareness, the element of education, the placemaking and the town planning, it's not going to change with the government that we currently have. Sure, we can say if we each get 10 people to vote, maybe it will shake something up. But the level of transformation, or the speed of transformation rather, is going to take way too long. And in the meantime, the loss of dignity continues to strangle us, to throttle us. So I would like to think that more stakeholder engagement, but stakeholder engagement in a more concentrated way, where we don't only look for external stakeholders for assistance, but rather see how we can generate some of that planning, some of that thinking amongst ourselves. And yeah, it's probably a naive way of thinking, but I think government has failed us for far too long for us to still think that whether it's a more African-led or more European-led government, that it would have our best interests at heart. Because Diepsloot is a post-apartheid township, and it looks exactly the same as the township that Debbie was speaking about in Gqeberha. You know, it looks the same as anything else. So the spatial planning will always be that spatial planning. No one is going to want to change that unless we actually change it ourselves. So starting a revolution, baby.
Priscilla, I'm going to jump in, and I just want to extend our deep gratitude to all of our speakers this morning. We've been so enriched. The work that you're doing is so powerful. It's so inspirational. We've learned so much. We look forward to being in touch for sure as we advance this project. But I just did want to reflect on a takeaway, and that is that each of you, in both similar and different ways, are using place to really redefine what practice is. And that alone is just so inspirational. And I wanted to thank you again. We've had a wonderful, for us, it's been a morning. I know it's afternoon for you, but we've had a wonderful morning here. And we very much look forward to staying in touch. And again, want to congratulate you on your extraordinary, extraordinary work. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you all.
Thank you.